Okay, everyone, Bruchim Haba'im, welcome to our Shia on Pirkei Avos. Today we're on Perek Daled, Perek Hey, Perek Hey in Pirkei Avos. We left off, believe it or not, more than a little less than a year ago, on the end of Mishnah Hey, which I'm going to review in a few moments. We begin with the introduction to all Pirkei Avos. Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelik liolam haba. All of the Jewish people, all of Israel, has a share in the world to come. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Va'amech kulam tzadikim," your entire nation is righteous. La'olam yirshu aretz, they shall forever inherit the land. Neitzer mata'ai, they are the branch of my planting. Ma'aseh yodai lehispa'er, the work of my hand that I may be glorified, says Hashem. And everything we learn in Pirkei Avos is for the purpose of glorifying Hashem's name. And so it is with all things that we learn in Torah. It's for the purpose of glorifying Hashem's name. A little less than a year ago, and I have the date down actually, it was on the 29th day in the month of Elul. The 29th day in the month of Elul, right at the end of the year, we ended off by learning Mishnah Vav. And if you go back in Perek Hey, you'll see that the Perek deals with issues related in some way to numbers. For instance, the very first Mishnah in Perek Hey starts out by saying, Ba'asara ma'amoros nivra ha'olam. The world was created with 10 utterances. And then that's the first Mishnah. And the second Mishnah echoes the 10 because it says Asara Doros Adam va'ad Noach. There were 10 generations from Adam until Noah. And Mishnah Gimel says there are 10 trials that Avraham Avinu was given. And then in Mishnah Hey, Mishnah Daled, it echoes the 10 trials, and it says there were 10 miracles that happened to our forefathers in Mitzrayim and 10 on the Yam Suf. And then Mishnah Hey says there were 10 nisim that happened to our forefathers in the Beis Hamikdash. So all of those were the number 10. And in Vav also, there was also the number 10. When it came to Vav, it says there were 10 things that were created on Erev Shabbos, right before the end of the day. And that was the last Mishnah we learned on Chof Tes Elul last year. Today, we begin with Mishnah Vav, Zion, which begins as you see it here on the screen. Shiva Devarim. Instead of 10, we're going to the number 7. After the number 7, we're going to go down to the number 3. And we're going to see that the number 4, that there are 4 midos. And then the number 3. And we're going to see that numbers play an important part in our lives. And this Mishnah begins with Shiva Devarim Begolam, the Shiva Bechacham. There are 7 things that can be said about a golem. Now, a golem, as far as the Medrash Shmuel is concerned, and the Rabbi Ovadia Mivat Tanura, imply something unfinished. Because we find in the Gemara and in the Mishnah, we even learn Golmei Kli Cheres or Golmei Kli Matris, things which are unfinished metals not made into kalim yet. So the word golem really means unfinished. You'll see here, the English translation calls it a clod because it's talking about someone who is just a clump of earth. And the famous golem of Prague, that Luria made was, so to speak, not a human being because he just could follow the orders and so on and so forth. There's all legends and midrashim. But the word golem literally means a person who's unfinished. He's a clod. and is not yet shaped into what he could be, and that is the next step. So Shiva Dvarim Begolam, there are 7 things that you could say about a Golam, the Shiva Bechacham. And there are 7 things about a Chacham. And it's clear that they are going to be the opposite. And the Mishnah begins by telling us, Chacham, he starts out by telling us what the goal is. What's the eventual goal? The goal is eventually to be a Chacham. And this Chacham, Eino Medaber B'fnei Mi Shu Gadol Mimenu. A Chacham doesn't speak in front of someone who's greater than him, the Chachma Uva Minyan, in terms of wisdom and in terms of age, in terms of count. Someone who's greater than you in terms of wisdom and age, you don't speak in front of him. We're going to learn later on, what do you mean you don't speak in front of him? What does that mean? You can't say a word? We'll see what it means. So there are 7 things. The first one is that a Chacham does not speak in front of someone who's greater than him, the Chachma and Minyan. The second one, that Eino Nichnas L'toch Divrei Chaveiro. A Chacham doesn't interrupt the words of his friend. He's patient and waits till he's finished, and then gives the response. Third, that Eino Nival Hashiv. He's not embarrassed to go and give the answer that needs to be answered. You have to say what's the truth. Go say the truth. You can couch it in as nice a way as possible and say it calmly, but don't be ashamed to give the answer. The next, Shoel Ke'inyan Umeshiv Kahalacha. You ask questions on the topic, and when you're asked halacha, you give according to the psak. So Shoel Ke'inyan Umeshiv Kahalacha. You ask on the topic, and you answer according to the halacha. The Omer, also, you always say, Al Rishon Rishon, the Al Acharon Acharon. You answer first questions first, and last questions last. Take a look at Chumash Bereshis. You'll see that there are examples of this, where you Omer Al Rishon Rishon, the Al Acharon Acharon. And the Alma Shelo Shama, if you don't know something because you never heard anything about that topic, Omer Lo Shamati. You could say, I never heard anything about this. I don't know what to tell you. Umoda ala emes, and you have to admit the truth. And admitting the truth is like we say in the davening in the morning, La'olam yei adam. Always a person should be moda ala emes v'dover emes bilvavo. Person should admit the truth and speak the truth in one's heart. If someone will speak the truth in one's heart, they will always be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Mishnah ends off by saying, the chilufeihem begolam, the exact opposite of these attributes, apply to the golam. So we started out by saying there are 7 things that are ascribed to the golam, and 7 that are ascribed to the chacham. The Mishnah goes on to tell us the 7 things of the chacham, and ends up by saying, and the exact opposite is by the golam. So we're going to analyze a little bit of this Mishnah, and we're going to start by telling us that a golam, as we said, is someone who is unfinished. He's someone who hasn't been completed. And someone who hasn't been completed doesn't have a full wisdom and understanding. So such a person is not yet a chacham, but ultimately he may be. Right now, the Mishnah says that there are 7 things about a chacham, not about the golam. And it tells us what's about the chacham. Why is that? Well, it tells us about the chacham rather than the golem, because as we said, the golem isn't complete. And when a person isn't complete, you don't see a complete picture. You don't know what the person has inside them. You don't know what capabilities they have yet. The potential may be there, But we can't tell you what that potential is until he begins to demonstrate it and develop it. You know, in Yiddish, there's a famous expression, anar seit minit kan hal ba'arbit. You don't show a child, and the word nar here meaning not only a child, but also someone who's immature, half of a job. You don't show half a job. A person who is shown a half a job can say, what? That's nothing. How are you gonna get something out of that? It's impossible. What are you doing? Without understanding what the finished job is. Let me give you an example. In order to grow wheat, you have to take a wheat kernel and you have to put it in the ground. So a chacham understands that when I take the wheat kernel and put it in the ground, what's going to happen is that the wheat kernel is going to disintegrate. And from the disintegration of the wheat kernel is going to grow a new wheat plant where you're going to get many more kernels. So a chacham is someone you can tell him, take the golem could say, you're putting that wheat kernel in the ground. I could eat that wheat kernel. It has nourishment in it. What are you doing? You're throwing away food. You're burying it. But the chacham, he knows the ultimate goal. He sees not the halba arbit, like the Yiddish says. He doesn't see half the job. He sees the whole thing. And so we have to tell you what the things are about the chacham. Because when we see what the things are about the chacham, we're going to see a finished product. We're going to see someone who's roa es hanolad. He sees the future. He sees what can come from this. So sometimes you have to bury something in the ground in order for it to come out and give you a full flower. Not an easy thing to contemplate sometimes, but that's the beginning of becoming a chacham. The golem can't do that. The golem can't visualize what the future is going to be. The chacham ain't of barosha. He's able to see that there's something there. Okay. The first attribute that we talked about a chacham was that he's someone who doesn't speak before someone who's greater than him. Why couldn't we say a golem is someone who does speak? Even when people are greater than him, he just lets it all out. Why couldn't we say that? Why does it have to start out by telling us about a chacham? So it's not the Midrash Shmuel. It was the Chelek Le'olam Haba Perish in Reb Shmuel Alter Sefer Likutei Basar Likutei. He says, well, I'll tell you why we couldn't do that. We couldn't do that for the very simple reason that a golem never thinks there's anyone greater than him. That's why he's a golem. He thinks he's God's gift to the world. And he can't recognize that there's someone really greater than him. A chacham, no matter how much he knows that there's someone greater than him. In fact, the greatest of all our sages, with the most brilliant minds, whether you want to say they're photographic memories or they're the product of diligence, like Einstein, Havdil said, genius is 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. It's the perspiration, the sitting and plugging away at learning that makes one a chacham. It's a hard job. But the chacham knows no matter how much I know, no matter how much I learn, there's many, many madregot higher than me. So therefore I could say, the chacham is enu medaber b'fni shehu gadol mimenu. Therefore we could say, the chacham can't speak before someone who's greater than him. the chokhmah uva minyan, in both wisdom and in count. But a golem, he doesn't get it. He thinks he's at the top of the world. He doesn't realize that it's possible that there could ever be anyone who is smarter than him. There's another reason why it begins with the Chacham rather than with the Golem. It is clear from the introduction of the Mishnah that when we say Shiva Devarim B'Golem, the Shiva, the Chacham, it's telling us that there are things about a Golem that are negative. As it says at the end of the Mishnah, the Chilufeim B'Golem. So the Golem is an unfinished product, and there's negative attributes to the Golem, while to the Chacham, there are positive attributes. Do you know that at the beginning of Masechta Psachim, the first word in Masechta Psachim is or la'arba osa. Now, the word or, every one of us knows, means light. But the translation of or la'arba osa means the light of the 14th, meaning the night of the 14th of Nisan, Botkin es hachametz le'or haner. You search for the chametz by the light of a candle. Look, the first word or means the night of. The second time it's used, it means the light. Now there's no question or means light. But every one of us knows that when you write an invitation, you'll say the wedding will take place or liyom gimel. What does or liyom gimel mean? Or liyom dalid? The night before. Why do they use that expression? Because the Talmud used it. And why, asks the Gemara, did the Talmud come along and use a word which means light, when really it means, you're saying it means night? What was the purpose of the Tana, of the Mishnah, of the sages of the Talmud to start Psachim with the word or instead of Laila or Nagi, nighttime? Why did it start with or? And the Gemara spends 3 pages on that discussion, and it ends up by saying, La'olam yedaber adam b'lashon nekiya v'kala. A person should always speak in as highfalutin language as you can, in as lofty an expression as you could use. Always speak in lofty ways. And the Gemara brings a number of examples. One of the examples the Gemara brings is that when it says by Noach, and it talks about Noach bringing into the ark animals, so Hashem told him to bring of the kosher animals and from the not kosher animals. Now, when talking about the kosher animals, the pasuk says, Behema tahora, the pure animal. The animal that's tahor is a kosher animal. Now, when you're talking about a treif animal, you could have easily said, Umina behema hatameya, from the tamei behema. But that's not what the pasuk says. The pasuk says, Mina behema asher einena tahora, from the behema that's not pure. It wasted 8 letters. I'm sorry, 5 letters. It said 8 letters instead of 13 letters. It wasted 5 letters. The Torah doesn't waste 1 letter. Why does it say, instead of saying, Min ha-behema ha-tameya, it says, Min ha-behema asher einena tahora, from the behema that's not pure. It could have said pure. Answers the Gemara, because the olam yadaber adam, a person should always speak and a person should always teach lashon nekiya v'kala. Always teach a short, sweet, but always pure language if you can. And even though the Torah does say the word tamei at times, that's because it's absolutely necessary. There's no other way around it. But the first time it said it b'lashon nekiya v'kala. It said it in a pure, nice way. Here's another example. Let's go to the very beginning of the creation of the world. Every one of us knows that on the first day, it says, Bereshis bara Elokim es Shemayim v'asa Oretz, and then it says, V'Oretz ha'isasol v'avo v'choshech al panei sahom, and there was nothing but darkness on the face of the deep. Vayomer Elokim yehi or. Vayehi or. And Hashem said, let there be light, and there was light. Next pasuk. Vayikra Elokim lo or yom. And God called to the night day, v'lachoshech kara loyla. And to the night, he called night. Now there's a Medrash Tanchuma on that pasuk. And the Medrash Tanchuma says an unbelievable thing. It says HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not associate his name with darkness, only with light. As it says in the pasuk, Vayikra Elokim lo or yom. God called the light day, v'lachoshech, and to the darkness, kara loyla. He called night. He didn't associate his name with the darkness. He only associated his name with the light. And from here, the Medrash says, we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu associates his name only with purity, only with the light. When Hashem created man, it says, Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam. God created man. But when it says he cursed the man, it doesn't say Hashem's name. Vayomer Orur. All he said was Orur. You're cursed, but he didn't put his name to it. His name is not there. David, if you got that piece from the Navi, now's the time to show it. There is a very interesting discussion in Melachim Beis, in Perek Vav, I believe it was, in Melachim Beis. If we have it, do we have it? If not, I'll
no, I need a minute.
What'd you say?
I'm trying to get it on the screen.
We'll see it in a minute. Okay. So I'm going to bring up an example from Melachim Beis, a very, very interesting example. Any of you who know the story of Elisha over there in Melachim Beis, this is a fascinating piece of Jewish history, but it's so exacting and it's so apropos in terms of our understanding this particular Mishnah, because the Mishnah starts out with Shiva Devarim Bagolam, and then it says the Shiva B'Chacham, and then it only speaks about the Chacham, because as we said, we want to speak only about the positives, only B'Lashon Nakiya. Now over there, I'm going to give you the background. The background over there is that the king of Aram is trying to make war with the Jews. Something new, I guess. He's trying to beat up on the Jewish people. And he has intentions of making a terrorist attack. Hey, there we go. He has intention of making a terrorist attack. And the terrorist attack is going to take place against the king of Israel when he goes out in the public eye. And it starts in Pasuk Ches in Perek Vav. And it says like this. You can read it here. Just very quickly, I'm going to paraphrase. The king of Aram, all right, was fighting with the Jewish people, and he advises his servants to say, tell me, I'm going to hide in this particular place, and I'm going to try to kill and ambush the king of the Jewish people. I'm going to kill him. Terrorist act. I'm going to kill him. Unbelievable, in the land of Israel. The king is going to go out and kill him. And Elisha the Navi, he sends a message to the Melech Yisrael. That's the next pasuk over here. He sends a message to the king of Israel. And he says to him, you better be careful. Don't go to this particular place, because that's where the people of Aram are hiding there, and they're going to try to kill you. And then in pasuk Yud, it says that the king of Aram, the king of Israel, sends to the place that he was told by Elisha, and he was very careful not to go there, not one time, not two times, continually. Every time there was an ambush set to kill the king of Israel, what happens? Elisha warns him, he doesn't go. So in Pasuk 11, Yud Aleph, the Pasuk says, the king of Aram's heart was all perturbed. It was like a storm, a sa'ar is a storm. There was a storm going on in the king of Aram because of this thing. And he calls to his servants and he says to them, who's the spy over here? Mimi Shalanu El Melech Israel. Who's the spy who's spying and telling the king of Israel that every time I go to him back, ambush him, he makes sure not to go, even though I knew he was going to go there. It was planned. I had the route mapped out. I picked it up on the computer. I was able to find out exactly where he's going. I knew from the inside. It was planned route. And he doesn't show up because someone tipped him off. Who's the spy? So one of the servants comes along and says to the king, there is no spy amongst us. There is that Elisha Hanavi amongst the Jewish people. Listen to what he says. Yagid lemelech Yisrael. He speaks to the king of Israel. He tells him, he knows what you're saying in your bedroom. This Navi Yisrael, this Elisha Hanavi, the Talmud of Eliyahu Hanavi, he knows what's going on, and you're speaking quietly in your bedroom. He knows everything. He's the one. So the king of Aram says, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go find out where he is, and I'm going to get him and bring him here. And he finds out that he is going to be, and he is in the city of Dosan. Now, there's a tremendous parallel here to the city of Dosan, which is only mentioned 2 times in Tanakh up until here. This is the second time. And I wish we had time to go into it, but we don't. But if you go back to Yosef HaTzadik, you'll see that it says that Yosef met his brothers in the city of Dosan. The parallel is about to come up. Anyway, he sends over there, he sends horses and chariots, a tremendous army, right? And they surround the whole city of Dosan. You understand? And the servant of Elisha gets up in the morning, you see, and he goes outside and he looks up around where he is and he sees there's this tremendous army surrounding the whole city of Dosan, and Elisha hasn't got a chance because there's no army with him. And he runs into Elisha, he says, Eicho Nasa, what are we going to do? We're surrounded by the enemy. So he says, listen to what Elisha says, it's so valuable. Elisha, he says, Al Tira, don't worry about it. Ki rabim asher we have more with us than they have with them. So the kid doesn't understand. I don't see anybody else out there. They got this tremendous army. What's going on? So the Pasuk tells us over here, in Pasuk Yud Zayin, in 17, Elisha davens to Hashem. Now watch what it says here. Vayispalel Elisha vayomer. Elisha davens and he says, Hashem, pekach na es einav v'yireh. Open up my little lad's, my servant's eyes, so he can see what's going on. Now watch what it says here. Vayifkach Hashem es einei hanar. Hashem opens the eyes of the child. V'hinei ha'har malei susim v'rechev eish sevivos Elisha. Chariots of fire all around the mountain, protecting the Jewish people. That's what it says. And the kid saw it. Why? Because it says, Yifkach Hashem es einav. Hashem opened his eyes. Now watch what happens further. We're now going to Pasuk Yud Ches. So all the guys from Aram come down, and Elisha starts davening to Hashem, and he says, watch this. Watch this Pasuk. Look what it says here. Hach na es Hagoy hazeh b'sanvei rim. Hit these people with blindness. And the pasuk says, Vayakem basanvei rim kidvar Elisha. And Hashem hit them with blindness, like Elisha said. Did you notice? Did you notice? Go back one pasuk. Go back. Did you notice that in the pasuk before this, when Hashem opens his eyes, it says, Vayifkach Hashem es einei hana'ar. Hashem opened the eyes of the young boy. But when it says that Hashem made them blind, it says at the end of pasuk Yud Ches, Vayakein basanvei rim. He hit them with blindness. It doesn't say Hashem's name. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not associate his name with the negative, only with the positive. Vayikra Elokim la'or yom, or la'arba osar. Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam. Only with the positive, not with the negative. Let's just finish what happens over here very quickly. So now in pasuk, where are we? In pasuk Yutes, pasuk Yutes, yeah, and pasuk Yutes comes along. Elisha says to them, "Lo zeh haderech, lo zeh. This is not the right way. You know, you're going the wrong way. And follow me. I'll take you." And these guys are blind as bats. They're looking at Elisha. They're talking to Elisha, and they're following him because they can't see a darn thing because Hashem hit them with blindness. Now watch this. Watch this. When they come to the Shomron, which is where Elisha lives, Elisha Hashem pekach es einei open the eyes of these guys so they'll be able to see. Vayifkach Hashem es eineihem. And Hashem opened their eyes. There's Hashem's name again, attached with the opening of their eyes. And Elisha says to Hashem, listen, should I smite them all? So Hashem says, lo taka. Don't hit them. You caught them. You captured them. Let them go back. Let them go back to their master. And sure enough, they go back to their master. And this, of course, brought about a great peace for the Jewish people, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what do we see from this? We see from this what we're trying to point out from the very beginning, that the reason it starts by telling us all the things about the Chacham and not the things about the Golem is because what we're trying to say is that we only mention Hashem's name in connection with all the positive things. And so the Mishnah is following the rules. And the Mishnah is telling us what the Chacham does. The Chacham is somebody who is only speaking in the most positive fashion, and it tells us what the Chacham is, not what the Golem is. Because our goal is to emulate the Chacham, not to negate the Nebuch attributes of the Golem, but to show the Golem what you can ascribe to. Do you realize that if you would only emulate and follow the Chacham, you would be turned from an unfinished clod into a person with wisdom, insight, and someone who Hashem attaches his name to? Because Hashem only attaches his name to those things which are positive. Vayikra Elokim la'or yom, v'la'choshech kara loyla. And consequently, we mention only the things that are about the Chacham and not the things that are about the Golem. Now, there are many more examples of this. And I wish I had time to go through all of them, but this will have to suffice for us. That we've discussed the uniqueness of the order of the Mishnah and the language to teach us a simple lesson about looking up to the Gedolei Hador, to the wise sages of all the generations, the sages of our time, the sages of the time before our time, And before that time, all the way back to Har Sinai, all the way back to Mount Sinai. And I'll end with one very little interesting anecdote while we're on that topic. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal was once sitting on a plane. I don't know if you remember if it was going to Eretz Yisrael or coming back from Eretz Yisrael. But they bought Rabbi Yaakov a first class seat, and he was in the first class cabin. And his beautiful seat was right next to one of the leaders of the secular movement in the land of Israel. And Rabbi Yaakov is brought onto the plane by his grandchildren, and he sits down in the seat. And the other man looks at Rabbi Yaakov with his beautiful beard and his smiling countenance. And he looks at him and he says, I'm not religious. I have no intention of becoming observant. I think the Torah is a sham. We have nothing whatsoever in common. I intend to sleep through the flight. Please do not talk to me. This is what he says to Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. So Rabbi Yaakov says, Shalom Aleichem, I appreciate, I won't speak to you. Okay, they sit down, the flight goes on, and the man is not able to sleep. He couldn't sleep. You know, he couldn't sleep, and he sees Rabbi Yaakov is learning, he's sitting and learning. So he decides to interrupt Rabbi Yaakov. He says, you really put store by that stuff? And Rabbi Yaakov closes the sefer and says, I know who you are. You're a famous historian. Isn't that so? The man says, yes. He says, I studied history too. The man is incredulous. What does a rabbi know about history? And they start talking history. Now, Rabbi Yaakov was a genius in history. Why? And in the sefer about his life, he tells that when he was a young man and he was in the yeshiva, when it came nighttime and he couldn't possibly pay attention anymore, after 18 hours, grueling hours of crunching every sentence in the Torah, he needed some relaxation. So he would read history books and devour them. And he knew all of world history, backwards and forwards. He was a genius in history. And he starts talking to this man, and the man is extremely impressed. He can't get over it. This rabbi knows his history. And they are talking and discussing and so on. And it goes on till the end of the flight. Towards the end of the flight, the man says to Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi, I got to hand it to you. But I want you to know, you didn't influence me one bit. But I do have one question. I noticed throughout the flight that all your grandchildren who were in coach class were constantly coming over to you and asking you, Zaidi, can we get you a blanket? Can we get you a drink? Would you like a coffee? Would you like to eat something? Would you like to get up and go for a walk? Always with the most awesome respect, with the greatest kavod. And I want to know, Rabbi, why is it that my grandchildren, says this secularist, they want to have nothing to do with me? They think I'm ancient. They say there's a generation gap. I can't talk with them about anything. Every time I say something, they look at me like a fool. But your grandchildren seem to have the greatest respect for you, and they think you're the holiest man on earth and the most wise. How did that happen? So Rabbi Yaakov said, I'll tell you. I'll tell you what I think the reason is. And here he really zinged it to him. He says to him, you know, you believe, as you've mentioned to me, that humans come from apes. I believe that God created us and gave us a Torah at Mount Sinai. Since God gave the Torah to us at Mount Sinai, every generation from Mount Sinai is getting further and further away. But the generation before them is one generation closer to the original standing at Mount Sinai. And consequently, they look upon me as one generation closer to the giving of the Torah, which affords me a tremendous amount of respect because I am closer to the source. And therefore, they want to learn from me and see if they can get some of the respect that comes from being closer to the source. Your grandchildren think you came from an ape. They don't want to have nothing to do with apes. And that's why they have nothing to do with you. And that's why we start out with who the Chacham is. Because we're interested in learning about the wisdom of the Torah and the greatness that accrues to the Jewish people, who are only 80 people away from those who stood at Mount Sinai. 40 years, 3,200 years ago, 3,300, so it's 82 people. Moses is standing there, Moshe Rabbeinu, 82 people away. That's not a lot of people. We're all there. And so it says Shiva Devarim B'Golam B'Shiva B'Chacham, and then it goes and talks about the Chacham, because Hashem associates his name with only the positive things. And we'll pick it up from here in Yetz Hashem tomorrow night, and we'll go a little deeper into this beautiful, beautiful Mishnah. Thank you all for joining, and we're about to go to the Mishnayos Shir right now.